Hi guys, welcome back once again. And today I'll be introducing the CSS basics. Today we'll learn what CSS is. I'm sure you already know what CSS is, but we'll learn how to add CSS in 3 different ways. And also we'll how to style text, backgrounds, and many more. Now, what is CSS? Like I said before, CSS is like a makeover. Cool, right? It's just like after building your house with HTML and you get a paint and beautify it. That's what your CSS does. It makes your website look beautiful. Okay. And why is CSS awesome? You can use it to add colors. You can use it to change fonts, and it makes your website look super cool. That's amazing. So we'll continue. Now, this is what the normal HTML code looks like. And this is when styled. I taught you something like this yesterday, and this is called inline styling. So now we'll see how the 3 methods work. The first one is inline styling. The other one, which is the method number 2, is internal styling, while the last one is external styling. Don't get confused. I will break it down for you. Now, we already learned the inline styling, and this is where CSS goes inside the tag. Like I told you before, that your elements, let's say for instance the P tag, you can add a style attribute right inside, okay, without having to close it, and not in between. I said inside. You can see what's on your screen. This part, you don't need to leave the angle brackets. You don't need to leave this tag here. You can add the style attributes inside. It's compulsory for inline styling. You don't just go here, instead of I love coding, you go and write style. No, it will not work. So and we already did this the previous class. Now this is an example of inline styling. I'll take you back to my code to show you what we did yesterday. Okay, here for this particular project, I will be creating a new file so we don't get confused with the old class. I'll name this styling.html and I'll be creating the HTML structure. And right inside the body, I will do this. I will add a tag, an element here, which is the paragraph element. So what will I'll say I love coding. Now I want to style this text right here. Like I taught you before, what you would do is right beside the P, which is the opening tag, right beside it, you say style. You write the style attributes, which is style equal to and quote. That is where you will style your elements. And the first style I want is, the first property is color. Now I'll be giving it a color of blue. Make sure to close it using your semicolon. Let's save this and see what it looks like. I will view it using the live server. Now this is what it looks like. Our text is now color blue. Wonderful. So this is how your inline styling works. There's no point going back to what we did the last time, because the only thing we did the last time was just inline styling. We will continue to the next method. And you use inline styling for small styles, you know. You don't do it for big websites. You will get confused. I told you the last time that As we were coding and adding more styles to it, the code kept getting longer and longer. You will need to now scroll to the other side of the screen to see what's there. And it's not advisable to use it, or else you just want to add a simple style there, you can use it. But if you want to add a lot of styles to a particular element, it is not always advisable to use an inline style. So the next one is the internal CSS. Okay, this is now a different type of styling. Now, how do you do this one? I taught you what the head tag is, right? And the structure of the HTML. Yes, I taught you that. That's where your links go into. That's where your title goes into, because whatever is inside the head cannot be seen on your web page. It's not the same as the body. It cannot be seen on your web page. It's just like the brain of the HTML. It's the brain of your website. So whatever you add in there cannot really be physically seen. Okay. So now what we will do is, inside that our head, I'm sure you already have a title there. Now just right below the title, you put the head, the style tag. Now let's go and do the same thing that you are seeing right here on the screen. You put the style tag and then name the element and style. Don't worry, it's not complicated. I will show you. Now back to my VS Code. I'll go to the head. This is the head. Make sure you are not doing this outside of it. Go to the head and I'll say the style. And first of all, I want to add another element to my body. Since we only have the P tag for now, I will add the H1 and I'll say this is my website. This is my website. And now if I want to style this, what I need to do is I will need to call this element's name, this element here, the tag name that you want to style. Let's say you want to style the P or you want to style the H1. What you have to do is here you say H1 and then parenthesis, this here curly brackets. Your curly brackets, you do this. I just hope you are not getting confused at this point. You just write the element's name. It can be P, but make sure it already exists inside the body. You can't just style something that is not there. It has to be existing already inside the body. So now we already have a P existing and we already have the H1 existing. So now what I want to style is the H1. So how do I do that? I call it by saying H1 and the curly brackets. Then I say color, just like we do. Color, colon. You close it with the double quotes and you say what you want the color to be. And I want it to be blue again. Good. Now let's see if this will work. Good. Can you see that my H1 is now blue in color? In case you are confused, I will redo this again. The way you can style your elements internally is this. How do you do it? You go to the head tag, and you add the style elements, the style tag. What do you do? Inside, I didn't say outside the style, in between the opening and the closing tag, you call that element you want to style. You know how we used to do everything internally, how you say the style equal to, this is an example of the inline styling. I'm sure you can see my screen. How you say the style equal to quotes, that property you want, colon, and then the value, close with a semicolon. when you want to do it internally, that is inside the head and not inline and not inside that element, you go up to where you have the head tag and then you create a style. This is a tag. This is an element on its own. Let me cancel this out just in case you are confused. I will say the style. And then in between this, I will now call the element I want to style, which already exists. Now the name of that element is H1. Okay, now I will say my H1. I will open my curly brackets. Now this is it. In between the brackets is where the style goes inside. Okay, I will give it a property, which is, let me give it another property. I will say font size, and I'll give this 30 pixels. All the properties we learned yesterday, you can still apply it here. The only difference is that you now need to call that element out. You need to call it out and then give it that same value, property and value, just like how we did it in the inline styling. That's the only difference. So now let's save this and see what will happen. Mind you, we've already gotten rid of the color we had. So right now, I will go and I will view this. Now the color is out, but our font has changed because what I did is I changed the font to 30 pixels. Okay, now let's go back to our slide. So now this is an example of internal CSS, like you can see on your screen, and they use almost the same example. They used, now if you can see this clearly, you will see that there's already a H1 in the body, and then it was now styled in the head. But the style tag is compulsory. This is what tells the browser that what you're trying to do is styling. You want to style this. As long as you are doing it internally, that is inside the head, that tag is very, very necessary. Good. So when do you use internal style? You use an internal style when you want to create a one-page website, because you cannot reuse that same style for another page. I don't know if this makes sense. It is not reusable on other pages because you are now adding it to one particular page that you are working on. Now that we have different pages here, let me show you what I mean. We have different pages here, the styling.html. We have another one called the style.html. We have another one, my ball.html. Whatever style you are doing internally to this particular styling.html remains in this particular page. It is not being reused. Just like when you do internal styling, it still remains here in that particular element you are working on. As for this one, it remains in the page, while this one just remains in that particular element you are trying to style. So this is an example of inline styling, and then this is an example of internal styling. I hope it makes sense. So like I said before, I said it is not possible for you to use it in another page. Like, you don't expect your H1 that you have in another page to be blue because you changed the head style, the internal style of one particular page. That's how this one works, okay? And one thing I want you to notice is that just like how we had a lot of styles in one element when you were doing inline styling the other time, you can have a bunch of styles inside one element. Just like this H1 I already styled. You see, let me show you what it looks like before I add more styles. This is a black text with a 30 pixels font size. Okay, this is it here. Now if I decide to change this to a font family, a different font family, I can still do that here, just like how we had a bunch of styles in one element. You can still do that as long as you have you've closed it using your semicolon. Now I will just say, I'll click on enter, go to the next line and say I'll add the font family and I will make it anything I want. So let me use this, the cursive. Let me show you what I mean. Now can you see the font family is different from the initial one it came with? This is what I want you to note. I can decide to also change the color still. I am doing everything now to just one element, right? Good. So I will say color. Just remember to close it with the semicolon. Color, I will say red. Save and view. Now it's red. So you can apply a bunch of styles to one element in the inline, in the tunnel as well. Okay, so let's go back to our slide. The next one is the external CSS. Yes, the external CSS is always added in a separate file. Okay, there is an important tag you must have for you to do this. You need the link tag. You need the link element. Okay, you need an element called link. CSS is going to be, you create a file now. You will not do the .html anymore for this particular file. What you will do is you give it a name. Since it's style, you can say style.what?CSS to tell the browser that this is for styling. It's a file name called CSS, Cascading Style Sheet. Now when we were just creating the normal HTML, what we did was we gave it a name, a good name. I taught you the naming conventions and I said you give it a good name and you must end it with .html. So now for the styling, what you do is this. You give it a name and you say .css. Now what you're now doing is you are giving it an external style, something away from the whole page, just a file on its own. Like you see my image right here. You can see my screen, right? This link is also added to the head tag. I told you what the head tag does. It houses the title, a bunch of links. Now we need to add another link, a styling link, to the head tag. And how do we do that? You write the link and then you give it, you link. I told you how to link something using the href, right? When we did the a tag. Now in the link, you still do the same thing. In the href, that is where you now link that separate file you already created. Let me show you how it's done. Back here, still in our head tag, okay. Now I'll click on enter and I will write the link. Now for the href, I want to give it a name. First of all, before I link it, I will create a file here. This is where you create a file, like I've told you 1,000 times. So now you can follow me as I do this. I'll create a new file and I'll give it a name. And the name will be, since you have to bear in mind that you're trying to do the styling here. So it will be style.css or whatever thing you want .css. This tells the browser that, okay, what we are doing now is this file is strictly for the CSS. Okay, for right now it is empty. This particular file is empty. We'll go back to our page. Now what you will do is you have to link that particular page you want to style. Okay, you have to link it to the file you already created. Now we've created the style.css. How do we make this page know that we are trying to add a style to it? Okay, how do you do that? You have to link that file here. That means you are now merging them together. You are merging the style.css file you created into this particular one. So I'll do that. Style dot, it's already giving me a suggestion, so I'll go for the one I want. What I want to link is my style.css. So I have done that, and it's linked now. So whatever thing we want to do will definitely reflect. So we don't keep using just 2 elements. I will add one more. Let me use the p tag. I'll add one p tag, and I want to leave this one this way. I'll get rid of the style I already added, the inline style, or maybe let's just leave it this way. I'll add the p tag. I'll create it twice. I will say hello my friends, and for the second one I want to do this. How are you? I've created 2 extra p tags here. Okay, now let's view our page and see what it looks like first before we begin. Now you have your hello my friends and how are you. Next thing to do now is, if you want to style the p tag, let me show you what will happen. You now want to style this p tag. Okay, let me go to the style, that file. Listen attentively. What I will do is, just like how we did in the internal styling inside the head, we called that one we want, and we put the curly brackets, and now in here you can now give it, let's say, color of green. Can you see the texts are now green? The 2 texts I added, the paragraph text, are now green. It did not target just one P. Because we mentioned P, it affected all the P's I have. Now, notice that this particular one already has a style, which is blue. That's why it wasn't touched. But this particular, the 2 new P tags I added do not have an inline style. And now for me to style it, calling the P means I have called every P I have on this page. Can you see? Now let me add an extra P so you see what I mean. I'll say hello again. I'll save this. This new one is still green. Do you know why? Because what you called is a P tag. So every P tag linked to that page that we added our CSS to changes to whatever font you add. Now let me give you another instance. Now we already have it as green, right? I want to change the font size of my P. I'll change the font size to 30 pixels. Now you see I've added a second style, right? And it's still inside the P tag, just after the closing semicolon. Now let's see what it looks like. Now every P tag is increasing to 30 pixels. That is what adding that single name did to this page. Now the next thing I want to teach you is how to style a specific element. Okay, let me show you that. Let's go back to our slide. But first of all, external is always use because it keeps your code tidy. Can you see how we are not adding much styles inside where we are working on our page? We created a separate file for it. Just like when you created a folder and you were adding, you added another folder for image. We kept our code tidy by doing that. Now, doing the CSS styling outside also makes your code neat. How? Now I don't have to write a long line of code inside one page that I get myself confused. So creating a separate file helps me now make it more organized. Okay, I can easily locate whatever elements I want to style. So now the next thing I want to teach you is CSS selectors. Okay, CSS selectors help you tell CSS which HTML to style. Okay, now you don't always have to be worried that if you select the p tag, it will take shape for every other p tag you have. Now you can always specifically say, okay, this is what I want. Now the styling we've been doing all along is called the element selector. And what do I mean by these selectors? An element selector is when you select just an element. Let's say I have 3H1 or I have 4H1 yes, on my page, and I select H1 and decide to style it in my external CSS. Even in the internal CSS, what happens? It styles every H1 the same way. That is what the element selector does. Okay, now there's another one called the class selector. This is used to style many elements the same way by giving it a name. Let me show you what I mean. It's an attribute, just like how we have the style, and we have one called class. We'll go back to our code. Let me show you what I mean. Go back to your page. Now for this particular one, I want to be able to style just one of my P's. I have 3 paragraphs here, but I want to style one. I don't want to keep selecting all the elements like we do in the style.css. I called P and it selected all the P's I have. So now what I want to do is, I want to be able to just pick out one and style it. How do I do that? You give it a name. That's why you and your siblings have different names, right? Yes, so that you can be able to identify your brother and your sister. You just call a name and they answer you. So that's good. We will give our elements, the one we want to style, we want to give it a name now. And I'll go to the hello my friends and I'll give it a name using the class attributes. And I'll give this friend. Let's give it a name. You can give it any name you want. So I want to call this one friend. So now what do you do with this name you've written? Okay, if you want to style this name now, since I've given it a name, other ones are still, all of them are P. But then if you want to personally style one, you have to give it something like a specific name. And I've given this one a name. How do I now style it? You go back to your style.css, come down here. You don't just come and you say friend. CSS will not recognize what you are saying. Make sure you copy the right name you gave it. That's the only way to recognize it. Make sure it's the right name, and then you say dot friend. Now when CSS sees this, it knows, oh, okay, it's a class. Dot is what tells you that something is a class. Class name. You see dots, that means they are talking about that, a class name, okay? So you don't just come to the CSS page, the file, you don't come to the CSS file or the internal file, whatever, and you just call the name. You don't just come to your internal styling and you just go there and you say friend and give it the curly brackets. It will not recognize what you are saying. So what you have to do is you start with the dots, that name, no space, all together, dot friend. Assuming I gave it a name, let's say boy, I will say dot boy. This is what tells it that what you are trying to target is a class named friend or a class named boy. So now that I have written this, what I will do is I will still open my curly brackets and I will say color is, let me give it a different color. Let me make it brown. Save this. Now let's go back to our page and see the one I styled. I styled the second paragraph. Remember to save your work. Go back. Now can you see that this paragraph that was green before because we mentioned all the P's is now brown because we pointed it out? Okay? Because you gave it a name, you can always reach out to it easily. I can also decide to make it have a different font and it will not affect the other P's. I hope I'm making sense. So inside here, I can decide to increase the font size. I want to increase it to 60 pixels. And then I want to change the font family to, let's say, monospace. You save it. And let's see what it looks like. Can you see it? The changes you are making is just going strictly to that particular name you gave it. That's the one cool thing about selectors. Assuming I want all my selectors to have a particular font, all my a particular element, like no matter how many times it appeared on my page. Assuming I want it to have a particular font size, I can just do the selector method, which is going to call the name. That is, let me just say that I want all the paragraph on a particular page to have this name here, to have this font size of 30 pixels. I can just go and call the P, the elements, call the elements and give it a general styling. That particular page, every P will have 30 pixels. That's how it works. But then if I want just a particular element, so now I just want to treat it differently, right? What do I now do? I give it a class name, which can be anything you want it to be. But for you to be able to style it, like I have always said, you need your dots right in front of it. You have to add your dots before that name. Okay, now this is what you call the class selector. You already know your element selector, which is just calling that element. You don't need to add the tag anymore. You don't need to add the anchor tag. Just that name inside, that element inside. Okay? So now let's go back to our slide and check out the next one. The next one we will be looking at is the ID selector. The ID selector is used for only one special thing. If you give an ID to an element, that is all. It is strictly for that particular element. Now let me make you understand what I mean. I'll go back to the code. Now just like how you write class equal to, you also do an ID. There's something called an attribute called ID. So I'll go back to our Visual Studio Code and I will show you what I mean. Now this is a class name, right? Good. If I also want this other P, this is my second P, right? The third P. If I want this other P to have the same qualities that my P that has the class name has, I can still decide to give it the same class name. Okay, I'll give it class friend. Let's see what will happen. Save this and go back to your Visual Studio Code. Now the other P that I assigned class to is taking up that same feature that the second P has, right? It has the monospace now, it has the color of brown, and it has a font size of 60 pixels. It is very possible to use the same class name as many times as possible. Now, if I also decide to make my H1 have that class name, or to have the same attributes that the P's here have, I can decide to copy that same class name and put it there, and it will affect that H1 as well. I don't know if you understand. You can use a class name as many times as possible. Okay? So now let me show you what I mean by ID not being able to be used again. Now I will add an ID to this paragraph. The unstyled paragraph I have here, the last man standing that hasn't been styled at all, we'll be making use of that, and we'll give it an ID of, let's say, main. It is our main element. And now I want to style it. I will go to my style, which is the file, the external file. And then what will I do? I told you that for the general element selector, the element, you just want to get an element. You can just call that element's name and put your curly brackets. And I also told you that when you want to give it a class name and you want to now style that class name, you use a dot. Now, when you want to style an ID, it is very important to note that you use the hash. Now look at my screen. This is what I mean by hash. This here. And then you write the name right beside it. Am I making sense? You don't give it space. You do it right beside it. Now, how do you do that? I already gave it a name of, what's the name I give it? Name. You have to make sure you are writing the proper name. Okay? You don't skip even a letter, because it has to be exactly how it is in your page as the name you gave it. So now what I will do is hash name. Now it knows that it is trying to target an ID. This hash, whenever you see hash as a style, know that it is an ID. I will say the color is going to be pink. Now the color of my paragraph is now pink. You see? You like it? Yes. The color is now pink, but ID is strictly to that paragraph. That name, that particular name I gave it, is now strictly to it. Let me show you what I mean. Let me remove this particular one now. This one that says friend as class name. Let me replace it with an ID of the same name I used before. I've given it a class name, right? I will save it. And then I will go and look at it. And it changed. But this is not advisable, because when you say ID, ID is strictly for one particular element. Now you are confusing the Visual Studio Code by not letting it know what the main ID does. Like what? So you can see, give it that same color as well. It's very, very possible that it will give you that style. It will give you that style you want. But then it is not advisable in any way to use ID 2 times. That's why you have your class name available. You can use it as many times as you want. But it is not advisable to use the ID, because in your advanced coding, you might need it and it will get you really, really confused. So don't ever use the ID name twice. You can use your class name as many times as you want. So I've now explained the class, the selectors, elements, class, and ID. Now I want to show you this table right here. just like I explained to you, if it's possible to actually take a screenshot of this or jot it down, so that you know that whenever you give a class name and you want to style it in your CSS file, you are starting with a dot. And when you give an ID, you give it a hash. Now, I want you to know that CSS can be used many times, while ID is used only one time. Okay, I mean one ID name. You can add ID to another one as long as it has a different name, so you don't get confused. You don't just use ID only once throughout the page. I mean that particular name. Let's say you gave it an ID of box. ID of box is ID of box everywhere. You cannot repeat it for that particular page. Okay? Or you can also now you can give another element an ID of container. It's fine. You can give another one an ID of something else. That's still perfect. But you don't give an ID the same name twice. You cannot use an ID 2 times. A particular name, an ID that has a particular name, you cannot repeat it 2 times. So I want you to also know that you can mix selectors. Do you know that? You can actually mix selectors. And how do you do this? I will go back and let's quickly create okay, now I want to style 2 selectors. I want to style the P. I'll give this one. Okay, yes, I will style the 2 P's. I'll use this friend, the dot friend, and then I'll also style the dot main. I want to give it the same style. And the hash main, I want to give them the same style. Now, instead of using the main, let me give this another class name. I'll give it a class name of hello. You can give it anything you want, just give it a meaningful class name. Now I want to select these 2. This one already has a class name of friend and this one has a class name of hello, but I want to give them the same style. How do I do that? You can go back to, you can do it either way, either the internal style. Let's say here I will say dot friend, and then I will still say dot hello and give it a style of, let's say, font size of 100 pixels, just so we can see the difference. Then I'll make sure I get rid of this so nothing interferes. Save my work and go to the code. Okay. Hello, my friends, and how are you? I'm giving it a font size of 60 pixels. Now we have the same pixels for hello, my friends, and the same pixel size for how are you. Now let's change the font family so that the difference will be very obvious. I want to use the monospace again. Okay. Now I am writing this and it's looking at me. Let's figure out what the problem is. Yes, right here, we did not separate it using a comma. You are trying to style 2 selectors, right? So you are meant to say this and this. If you want to add an extra one, you can also add it. So now I am trying to style the friend and the hello, the class names. I'm using .friend, comma, .hello. Now let's see, I gave it a font size and font family of monospace. Let's see what it will look like. I'm trying to style 2 selectors. Now look at this, wonderful. Now the hello my friends and how are you are the same, has the same font size. It also has the same font family. This is how you can merge 2 selectors together. Now let's go back to our slide. Now we have been styling text all along. Now I want you to add a color to it yourself, to an element. I have already done that, so you won't say you don't know how to. So add a color to the P tag and use the color red. Also change the font family to any one of your choice. And I need you to add a border, but don't worry. Let me show you that since we've not done it today, we've been doing it before, so I will do this myself. I still want you to know that you can do an inline styling. You can also do an internal styling, which is this one I'm doing here. Notice that even though I use the selectors, I still did the selectors styling here in the internal. So I just want you to understand that it's not strictly for the one you created a separate file for. Okay, you can still do the you can still style a selector using the normal internal CSS. Now let's add a border to one of the elements. Let's add a border to the hello, which is the how are you, the class name. You can go to either the file or the internal. Let's say dot hello, our curly brackets, and I'll say border. I'll say 2 pixels. I'll give a solid and a color red. Let's save this and check it out. Now our border is out. It has 2 pixels width and 2 pixels width. It has a color of red. So now I want you to do the same yourself. I'm going back. You can also add the background color. So any property I taught you yesterday for the previous time for inline styling can still be used here. So any property at all can be used. You can still do the text align, and you can still do the padding. Now let's add padding to that same one that has a border. I already told you severally what the padding means and what the margin means. So now I'll add a padding to this, and I'll add an equal padding of 20 pixels. Can you see it has a lot of space around it now? Enough for me. Good. You can also do the same thing using the margin. So now I want us to know what all the styles we've used today. We added a color, added the font size, changed font family. We also added background color, border, padding and margin, then text align. Now for your take home, I want you to create a simple HTML file called pet.html. And step 2, use inline CSS to color the pet's name. The other one is internal CSS. Use that to style the background and headings. And then lastly, I want you to use external CSS in a style.css file to style paragraphs and images. And that is all for today. See you next time, guys. Bye-bye.